All right. I will go ahead and kick us off. So good afternoon, folks on the East Coast like me. Good morning, folks on the West Coast, which includes, I think, maybe most of our panelists today. And welcome. I'm Grace Kegley. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Education, Finance, and Policy. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar as part of our Dialogues on AI and Education series. So this series brings together researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to explore how advances in AI are shaping education, from research and data use to policy and practice. We're excited for today's conversation on how district and state leaders are thinking about AI adoption and what that means for the field moving forward. Before we begin, I do want to flag our next webinar in the series is scheduled for May 20th. Which will focus on reflections from the AAFP community on education, research, and AI. And we hope you'll be able to join us for that as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to today's moderator, Shira Haderline. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you everybody for being here and taking time out of your busy day to be here. I'm going to start with a short intro and presentation, and then we will hear from our wonderful panelists. So bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my PowerPoint presentation? Okay, awesome. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad to have you. My name is Shira Haderline. I'm a researcher at the Center on Reinventing Public Education, or CERPE. I'm going to start with some brief housekeeping. So this session will be recorded and posted on AEFP's YouTube page. If you have a question, which we hope you do, please put that in the Q&A function in your Zoom window. And the chat is also enabled for crosstalk. I'm going to spend a few minutes grounding us in what we're seeing nationally when it comes to AI in education. And hopefully I'm going to keep that very short so that we have time to hear from our wonderful panel of speakers to learn about what's happening on the ground. So let's start by norming a little bit on the current AI landscape. The data that I'm sharing today comes from CERPE's AI Early Adopter Rapid Response Research and RAND's nationally representative surveys. So we know that students are already using AI. In 2025, 54% of students reported using AI, which is a more than 15% percentage point increase compared with surveys in the past 2 years. And this is happening independently of school guidance or school readiness. So while students report using AI, they're not necessarily receiving guidance from teachers and schools about how to use it responsibly. Only 19% of students reported getting training from teachers on how to use AI for schoolwork, and 35% of school district leaders report providing training to students about how to use AI for coursework. Teachers in many cases are also not receiving adequate support. Only a bit over half of teachers reported that they received any school or district provided PD on resources or resources on AI, with the majority of those teachers saying that they only received a little. And we also see differences across districts in access and capacity. So there are big gaps between the shares of districts providing AI training to teachers in low poverty districts compared to high poverty districts. So what does this mean? Ultimately, we have an adoption and implementation approach to AI in education that really doesn't match the current reality. AI is advancing rapidly, and by the time tools are approved, the landscape has often already shifted. And the results are a series of critical gaps. This results in things like unsupervised student adoption, where students are using AI regardless of school guidance, and districts are really missing out on their ability to shape student use towards specific learning goals. There's misalignment with stakeholder goals and concerns. For example, students' concerns about cognitive offloading or environmental impact, or families worry about privacy and misunderstanding of AI's roles. And there's eroded buy-in as well. So parents are asked to endorse ambitious AI visions without being meaningfully included in the decision-making process. And ultimately, AI adoption isn't really just about what tools to use. In many ways, it's more about system implementation and change management. Leaders are often navigating a set of really critical trade offs and competing priorities, things like how much flexibility teachers have to try new tools in their classroom versus how much direction should come from the district or the states, what policies and safeguards are needed to address privacy, equity, and risk while still allowing for meaningful AI use and experimentation, and also how to connect AI to a broader instructional vision versus implementing in a more fragmented or pilot-led way. These aren't choices with simple answers, but they are critical for shaping how AI is used in practice. And that's what we're going to hear from our panel about. So next, I'd like to turn to our wonderful panelists. We have leaders here who are working through all of these questions and more in real time. So I'm going to start by stopping my share. And I'd like to go around to my wonderful panelists. So please introduce yourself and your work. Yourself and your work. Please tell me your name, what you're seeing with AI adoption that you're most excited about, and what problems that you think AI has the most potential to solve right now. Christian, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. So hi everyone, and thank you, Cher, for the I get the intro and just getting us a little bit oriented. But my name is Christian. I work with a nonprofit called the AI Education Project, or AI EDU for short. We work nationally with school districts to help them make sure that teachers and students are ready to thrive in a world where AI is everywhere. So I do a lot of national level work, and most of the my function is a lot of our external affairs. So thinking about how do we share, create networks, create partnerships, and even work with government agencies sometimes. Um, I mean, think about the thing I'm most excited about. I guess the thing I'm most excited about is also the same thing that I think that AI has the potential to solve right now. I'm less focused on like AI tools solving specific problems. I'm more excited about the broader theme that we're seeing that because AI is really making a lot of changes, it's forcing us to think a little bit more broadly and maybe even a little bit more hopefully about how education systems can transform to prepare kids for the future that we know they're going to grow up into. This is kind of an era in which that future is very blurry for a lot of educators. We actually don't know exactly what that future is going to look like, and that's kind of scary, to be honest. But it gives us a little bit of a opportunity to think about, okay, what are the actual core things that our students are going to need? And we usually kind of fall back to a lot of student-centered or human-centered skills and competencies and mindsets, and that actually is quite exciting for me to see those things come to light.
Great, thank you so much. Jessica, can you go next?
Sure. Thanks, Shira. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Vavris, and I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Educational Service Districts in Washington State. And many states have ESAs or BOSUs or educational service agencies, and Washington State has 9. And I work for all 9 of them. Part of my job is to help implement and scale statewide initiatives across our 9, as well as work in partnership with other state agencies, most closely with our State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. We call it OSPI in Washington State, but we also work with other state partners and associations. And in our ESDs do the gamut of work. A lot of it is centered in professional development, so that's where this conversation is. But we also provide direct student services, behavioral health, special ed, and we also support on the operations side in communications or fiscal health and those sorts of things. And so I've been doing work at the state level in Washington for over 20 years. And in this time where we're moving into AI literacy across the continuum, it's really exciting for us because we are able to level our capacity within the ESDs, but also collaborate really in meaningful ways with our other associations. So that's a big thing for us. With our state education agency, they issued AI guidance and human-centered guidance. That's sort of the extent to which our SEA has engaged. But what that did for us was it created a super cool system level opportunity for our ESDs, our 9 ESDs, our state school directors association, so our school board members, our state superintendents association, our school administrators, principals association, our teachers union, WEA in Washington State, and then also we have a statewide information cooperative, information services cooperative. So on the technical side, we sort of have partners in this space. We've been collaborating for a couple of years, but we're really like learning together. And we are also growing our support system across the continuum together, depending on our different audiences. So it's really a great opportunity to calibrate and be in the same boat together and align in ways we haven't aligned in Washington State before at the system state level.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I'm Chris Nesmith. I'm the superintendent of the Elma School District and co-lead of the AASA Redefining Ready cohort, so a cohort of superintendents from across the U.S. trying to build career college life readiness for their students. I think one of the things I'm excited about is AI just has an unlimited potential to really help humans collaborate and better understand each other. It's just a great tool when you start thinking about individual agents on taking information and kind of breaking it down. And that really aligns to our work. I mean, in Elma, we were nationally recognized for building school district and industry level partnerships on how we've kind of identified occupational competencies from our employer partners and create the intersection between academic skill sets. So students can be off on the job doing work-based learning environments, but then also working through integrated English, math, and science context. And one of the barriers we've seen is just that ability to translate between what occupational employers need versus schools, because we don't generally speak the same language. I think one of the new potentials, though, is moving. I mean, like AI. I've coached rugby for 25 years, and I think about building an athletics team, right? Like I have someone who's a rugby prop or a lock or a wing, and everybody has a different skill set that they have to bring together, and that's really this human collaboration model. But now AI has the potential through, as we move from agents to agentic, to kind of look at those individual team models. Like I have an employer translator agent, and then we have a academic skill set agent, and then we have an intermediary based agent that helps you navigate occupational bureaucracy like youth labor laws, and then you have an agent manager, so students learning how to function as individual teams as actual people, and then understanding how we can kind of translate that to the design in our agentic design and our productivity base. So I think this move from agent to agentic and how that kind of correlates to the human team, the human interaction and the human team aspect is one of the things I'm most excited about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the first big topic we're going to get into is the dynamics between districts, schools, and states, and how decisions are made across different levels of the sector. At SERPI, we love thinking about systems, so we're really grateful to have people from all different levels of the system here to talk with us today. I'm going to start with just a little bit of takeaway from some of our early AI adopter research. So we know that there are a lot of pilots and different approaches to AI adoption, and the approaches are really varied across districts and states. So what might be true in your local context might actually be quite different from the approach in a different context. And Christian, I know you can talk a lot about that as well. We keep hearing that districts want states to set guardrails, but then to kind of like get out of the way so that they can experiment and explore. And I'm sure that's what we're going to talk about a bit today. And that progress is being made, but that it's not always coherent or aligned. So these are just some of the dynamics that I think you'll hear today. I'd like to start, Chris, with you. So you're in Washington, and Washington is a heavy locally controlled state. As a district leader, how is that playing out in how you approach AI and how you use AI to solve problems?
I mean, a lot of our work kind of predates GPT-3. We were already like figuring out like I'm going to go all the way back to like 2016 and 2017, taking a chance to go tour Germany and then Switzerland and looking at this international TVET, technical vocational education and training model, and going like, what could schools look like? And then Elma was building out these youth apprenticeship-based systems. And then we were a member of the Washington State Mastery-Based Learning Collaborative. So we're the only whole school district that was a part of that. So building out this mastery environment to award credit based upon academic integration, building industry level partners. But it was a really kind of slow and drudging process. You're meeting with employers, mapping out competencies, you're having meetings back and forth. And it's about a 9-month process to kind of figure out what the employers need, how you create introduction, how you navigate youth labor laws. And when AI began emerging, it was like, oh, we could actually start moving into agent work, or we can start kind of mapping out academic competencies, or we can start. So just even using GPT-3 and meeting with employers and uploading job descriptions to output occupational competencies, taking our district internal designed academic competencies and standards, and then looking at those proficiency scales and creating intersection. And it was just kind of doing that basic level work. And as the tools have evolved, like our work continued to evolve. I mean, we're like, how can a TVET system work within the United States? And I think I always lead off when we do these things. I always think it's kind of funny that we are part of these studies, because you meet these other groups that are like, hey, we're doing the most incredible AI work. I don't actually know if we're doing the most incredible AI work. We haven't really been paying attention to the AI work. We have a mastery-based environment for kindergarten where we partnered with the Parks and Rec department to put kindergarten learning competencies across all the parks in the community. And we had to use AI to map out occupational competencies to make sure that just our built infrastructure through Parks and Recreation could drive kindergarten readiness. And we had to use AI to translate and map and drive communication. And it just expedited and sped up the work that we were going to do with AI or not AI. But we found out we just got put on a moving sidewalk, and we were just moving kind of at record pace. So it's solving problems that we were already working on before AI existed. We just realized it was helping, and again, it's evolved. I mean, because we were doing it through, first we were just shoving it into AI, then we were running agents. Now we're like, oh man, we can actually build a team and run into agentic. So we have our occupational agent, academic, and now we can actually start building agent teams that start doing the work we want to do. So we just, as the AI is evolving, we're just evolving it to solve the work we're trying to get done.
Awesome. Do you mind taking a minute to just describe like some of these different AI terms? So the difference between like an agent, agentic, like just to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, I don't want to pretend to be. I mean, maybe Christian's going to have to translate for me. But we started off just building like taking regular ChatGPT and uploading job descriptions and say what are the occupational competencies, to actually building an agent that ingests and then creates I can't remember what all the terms stand for, but we have a RAG output. So it's just going to read job descriptions and it's going to create a consistent job output. To now we've started, to occupational competencies from job descriptions to our employer partners. This is an example of what we're doing. So the agent is kind of prescribed and defined, and it'll kind of create the same output. To now what we've done is we realized that we can actually, just like if I was going to build a team, I can have my occupational competency ingester, I can have my occupational competency output tool I can have my academic standard reader that can read all the different academic standards, and another one that will intersect. And you can create these different agents, and then you can create a operations manager agent who will tell each agent who goes first and who does what job first, and who can actually say, okay, you go, and then when you're done, you go, and then when you're done, you go. So then we realized that we could use like OpenClaw and start like actually taking our agents and giving them individual jobs and an agent in charge of them to start actually expediting the work faster without removing our teacher experts. So then that way we still have our human teams that kind of get to sit with those agents and see the work they're doing. But we realized, just like if I was going to build a team of people, we can build teams of agents.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jessica, I'd love to move to you. So you sit a bit further upstream and you work across districts and ed agencies. Where are you seeing alignment or tensions between state guidance, district strategy, classroom reality?
So a little bit about Washington State, like Chris said, and you pointed out, we're heavily local control. We're one of 12 states with a publicly elected state superintendent. We have 295 school districts, 18 public charters, and 8 were the first state that had state tribal compact schools. And that they operate on their own in the space of K-12. Our ESDs, our education system, supports all of these schools. We're pretty fragmented in our governance structure. So we have our governor, who is separate from our state superintendent. Sometimes they have vision around education, sometimes they don't. We have our our higher ed teacher prep system is separate from the K-12. We also, our accountability system, we have a state board of education that is separate from our SEA. So all of that sort of sets us up to be somewhat fragmented and also really slow in like catching on. Chris talked about 2017 and 18. I guarantee you that time maybe our state superintendent was thinking about AI, but the office of superintendent was definitely not on the radar about like AI and it's the opportunity it presents us. Our districts range, so Elma's in a really sweet spot. We have school districts that range from like 10 students to 50,000 in Seattle. Elma's around 1,700. So like perfect ecosystem with a leader who is really thinking about how to leverage the latest technology and ways to serve their students locally. But we have the continuum. So the tension for ESDs, the tension for our associations is a lot around that continuum of how do we set ourselves up so that we can provide just in time support to educators or school district or building leaders wherever they are on the continuum. And like if you're trying to do everything for everyone, you sometimes don't do anything well, right? So that's part of the beauty of the collaboration among our organizations is we're trying to really take stock of what are we each doing within the lane of our audience or our members, and how do we right size the different roles? So OSPI doesn't need to be out there doing PD with teachers all the time. Like, what is their right place with the human-centered guidance? They set the direction of the sales, and like open up the doors to all of us to work together and be really unpacking those different opportunities and challenges depending on the hats that our members wear. So, for example, our school administrators have a conference coming up this coming weekend where they will spend full days with their superintendents from across the state on different problems of practice. One of them will be AI in the central office landscape, but also in service to teaching and learning, like how our superintendents like Chris equipping themselves, equipping their teams, and not just like plugging their ears and ignoring it, but how are we being responsible and and acknowledging the tension of the innovations that largely like in many districts are probably happening in the classroom level. And so how do we like welcome that in without shutting it down, but also do it in a way that's mindful to security and coherence and all those other pieces related to things that we're juggling in that picture. So that's, I think for us, that's the tension. And we also have Washington, I mean, other states do too, but we have private funders that are interested in lifting up some really great work our districts are doing. And so we have about 20 districts-ish that are on that trajectory of the innovators, and they're getting a lot of infusion of support and resources and coaching and all the things. And Chris, I don't even know if you're in those networks. So then we have like districts like Elma that are just like we are putting our heads down, and we're even further on than some of those, right? And then we have districts that are like, wait a second, we've locked everything down. We're not doing AI. And so how do we create spaces to have people come together and learn at the pace that will invite them to actually make some progress versus shaming them because they're not integrating or adopting AI into their work. But how do we have it use it? Look at the problems our different districts or educators are trying to solve and have it be an invitation to a tool that could help them solve problems that are relevant to them just in time, just like Chris was describing with his problem of practice.
Awesome. Thank you. Christian, I'd love to move to you and to talk a bit about the national viewpoint. So just as we know, as Jessica was talking about, that there's a lot of variation in approaches across districts, there's also a lot of variation in approaches across states, with some taking a more top-down approach and some taking a more bottom-up approach and everything in between. I'm wondering if you can share a bit about what you're noticing about different approaches, and also how that interacts with things like implementation or the progress being made.
Yeah, but before I get into like the general views, I actually want to reiterate the importance of something Jessica was talking about just now. Like the idea that as someone who oversees like a state level organization, like one of the key things you can do before guidelines or policies is like actually creating spaces for collaboration. Like breaking down silos within the education system is actually so important. The question of like, how do I get superintendents in my states to talk with one another? How do I get someone like Chris to talk to other superintendents who have not even thought about this quite yet? Like that's something that I think a lot of folks that sit at that kind of like state level seat have a lot of opportunity to do. And I do think that that is something that I see as a trend across several states. People, whether they're sitting at the state agency, governor's offices, whether you're sitting within like ESC networks, ESD networks, or RESA networks, whatever states call them different things. But I think that's something that we've seen a huge trend in, even in the past like 4 years, is these networks creating this function of breaking silos. And I think that's quite important. Um, Now, from like a change management perspective, whether that's from the lens of policy or from the lens of guidelines or actual, budgetary allocations, it varies so much across states. I think you referenced this a little bit, but some state agencies do have a little bit more agency for top-down change. We have states like Ohio, for example, in which the state Department of Education and Workforce is directly overseen by the Lieutenant Governor's office, and they actually have a direct line into the state's budget. And so, as that state agency actually does have a lot of input for even how, from a governor's perspective, how the state budget is set for the year. And so they're actually able to directly mandate things. They're actually able to directly tie things to budgetary priorities for the state. And they're actually able to put provisions on state grant programs based off the priorities that the state education agency is setting. That is a lot more of a top-down mechanism that that state agency has for change, as opposed to states like Washington and California, in which those state agencies are actually not directly overseen by the governor's office and don't have direct ties to the but have don't have like direct insight or agency against the budget, and instead they're usually overseen by like a state school board or some sort of other function, and um, they're able to give the perspective of what the state cares about from a conceptual and I guess like a values-based perspective, create guidelines and toolkits and resources, but they're not actually able to like mandate and leverage those kind of toolkits to actually be implemented. And so I think right now across all 50 states, we only have two states that have a state level mandate for AI policies to be in place. Ohio and Tennessee, I believe, is a recent addition here. But these are states in which the state agency has said every district in my state has to have a student AI use policy, a teacher AI use policy, a procurement policy. I think in Ohio it's by July of this year. That mandate was issued in January, so they were given every district was given 7 months to submit their policies. That's a very top-down thing that a state is able to do because if the districts don't submit policies, then they're actually at risk of losing state level funds from the governor's budget. And so like there's a direct motivation there for states to actually comply with that kind of policy. But states like California, I sit on the California AI work group with the Department of Education. We're actually in the middle of drafting our AI policy toolkit right now, but we know for a fact that it will only be a resource to districts, but it can never actually be a mandate. We can give districts model policies, we can help them implement them, we can be a resource to districts, but it requires districts to lean in. And so you get folks that are leaning in and have been leaning in and asking for these policies, guidelines, and waiting for the guidance, and that is a huge support system for those districts. But then you do have districts that haven't quite leaned in yet or even thought about asking the question. And so it really creates the state agency needs to have some sort of mechanism to create buy-in, to give folks this space for conversations to even start. And I think that usually takes a lot longer. And so change happens, but at a little bit of a slower rate.
Great. Yeah, that's such helpful context. And it kind of brings us into the next section where we're going to talk about implementation and to connect some of those system conditions with bigger goals and trade-offs and kind of the messy middle that happens when these policies and guidance are implemented. Chris, I'd love to start with you again. So what is your approach when it comes to choosing AI tools, and what are some trends that you're seeing in how teachers are using the tools, and what role the district plays in helping to guide that use?
It's kind of a difficult question now. I think we're entering a new world that I don't think most school districts have really scratched the surface on the opportunities in front of us. Um, I think kind of laying out the problems. We have like student record data, FERPA regulations, but then we also have the human system. I was an IT computer science teacher when I was in the classroom. So, and it kind of reminds me back when I mean, I haven't been in the classroom since 2013, but it kind of reminds me back like you have an interface or a user experience problem. So, I mean, like when we're looking at our teachers looking at using software or looking at any kind of new AI tool, they're looking for an interface that's comforting and familiar, and they want that user experience. And you see some tools on the market have really kind of addressed that. Like they've created this very familiar user experience. You click this button, it does this thing, it'll do this output. You can turn this vocabulary lesson into a song, or you can do this, or you can do that. And it's all really self-contained. But it's just not the work we're trying to do. The work we're trying to do is we're trying to show how the schools, the current environment of the US education system right now is the school system is the silo. And we're trying to use AI to keep schools as a silo. And that's just not what we're trying to do in Elma. We're trying to show that a school can be the central hub of the community, and the entire community can be the learning environment, which is why we partnered with Park and Rec. And there's no tools for that. So it just doesn't exist. So, but we don't have to buy now. We don't have to pick tools. And I think we need to really break apart that misnomer that this is what the future is allowing us to be. We're at, I think, the best time in public education we could ever have. And I think everybody's running around with their hair on fire, missing it because we're trying to keep education to be the same. We're looking at declining enrollment. Students are going to new schools. They're going shopping. They see, vouchers and all these opportunities. And we have the ability now to define what we think education can be and what our model can be. And we have tools to actually make it happen and navigate the change management process. So and these tools that are available are expensive. They're expensive, right? They cost a lot of money. They make all kinds of promises. They kind of keep you in the old way, and we don't have to do it anymore. So when I talked about our agentic work, when we started shopping around, when we were just doing agents for like $25,000, we could build our own occupational competency ingester. Employers upload we meet with our local employers, they upload job descriptions, it breaks it down into competencies. We were given a $10,000 grant to train other districts on what we're doing through one of our state higher ed agencies. And we reached out to the same organization. So just as we've moved into agentic, so have all of these different program builders. So they have actual full, software suite productions of agents. One does the ingest, one does this. So I said, like, how long would it take? So just a year ago, when we built our first tool, it took about 4 months or 3 months to put out our AI tool. I said, if we were to update this now to create user accounts and build out our different models and actually have the background of our agentic design, that we can move to a higher quality UX, UI for our staff. They said 3 days, we'll meet next week. Our agents, our agentic programmers will actually build this suite for you. So we can actually, we're not buying tools. We can actually, through this RAG consolidation of data model, we can actually program our own but protected information. We pay for our own AWS server suite. When we're looking at what tool we're using, right now we're running on Gemini because we partnered with Google Education, and Google Education gave us a pile of free tokens. So we realized that we can call Google and they'll give us the tokens because they think what we're doing is really, really cool. So when we're shopping, we can change out the AI, the LLM model based upon cost per token. We can change out, we can move from an AWS to a different type of server to store our information as we're logging it in. But for 10 grand, we can actually build out to the next level because now these programmers are using their own agentic design. Schools should not be shopping for the next pre-made tool that continues doing education the same. We can now build our own custom learning environments branded for Elma, hiring our own companies to kind of do our own things, protecting student information that kind of creates that user experience more simplistic. And everything we have is Elma branded. All of our AI tools that we've built. Now we're moving to the next level of our agentic build. Our teachers, if you met with them, they wouldn't know anything. They're just going to the Elma website and it's outputting everything they need, they know they need. And because we knew that we needed to control that. So I don't know if our people would even say that they feel how deep into AI they are, because we've decided that our priority needed to be on the UX UI of implementation to manage that change management process. But everything we've built, there is no product. Everything we've built is through custom programmers, custom designers, because that's cheaper now than anybody you're going to go hire. You should not be buying a product anymore. You need surveys done, you can actually, for cheaper, build your own agentic community survey tool. You don't need to pay for it. You don't need to pay 50 grand for this company when you can build your own tool for 5.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you captured in terms of just this tremendous potential for transformation that AI opens. So one of the domains where there's also potential for transformation is in the role of the teacher. And Jessica, I'd love to kind of hear from you on that. So how, if at all, do you think that AI is impacting the teacher role? And how do we build trust with teachers, even while there's all this uncertainty around how their role might change and what it might look like in the future?
So I mentioned the collaboration among our associations. We hosted a summit in February of last year, where we had district and building teams come. So we had teachers, we had some school board members, the whole continuum there. And it was super cool. I was just reflecting as Chris was talking about the the teachers that shared. I they and everyone that shared their problems of practice or the things they were building, it was tool based. And the conversation at the time was, which tools, how do we review tools, how do we pay for tools, how many tools, all the things. And just in a year, how that conversation has progressed. And so we again have this continuum where you have the folks at the very basic 99 level that are probably still about the tool and, what tool is best for lesson plans or what tool is best for this. And so how, like, my answer is really zooming out to, we have a district leader here who has created, I'm assuming, Chris, within your team, your district team, it's not just you, a proficiency of understanding and language and agency in the sense of the word for helping teachers navigate that space of use. So your tech department is probably fully equipped with an infrastructure that if you're in the environment of your school district, it's safe and everything's vetted and all the things that need to be locked down are locked down. In for teachers, it was super great to see the networking spaces, whether it's in a district, in a PLC model, or even we have several of our regions are convening educators to share and work together and network. And I think that's the building of a supportive system internal within a district and even our ESDs, like building their own muscle memory and capacity to navigate AI as it is changing. So there's not just a single AI expert who knows everything. How are we embedding the knowledge and also the ability to be nimble within our own organizations? So taking the time to build that, whether it's a district or building leadership level or within your teacher leadership teams, things like that. or at an organizational level, a state association level. So spaces like you were saying, Christian, spaces for networking and sharing where it's judgment free, where you're able to differentiate and share. And I think there's figuring out ways. Our space where we are right now is how do we capture and lift up the work of the pilot projects that are being invested in. I know Serpy, you're involved in a space on the operational level. We have Microsoft investing in the teaching and learning level. So it'll be really interesting to see what the 10 districts involved in that come out with. And then how do we lift those up, but also how do we leverage teachers that are doing it on their own? And what are the conditions within their systems that are supporting them so they're not doing it in secret? And I think that's a really big thing. And Chris, actually, Chris, you mentioned earlier briefly the higher ed connection, but I really do think my daughter just graduated with her teaching certificate, and use of AI in teacher pre-service programs like is wildly variable, even more so probably than K-12. And so what are we doing to equip our future teachers like today to not be scared and not just use it as, a random search engine? Like it can be a really amazing tool. So I think those are just some things that as we're thinking as a system that are coming to mind.
Yeah, I love all of that. Jessica, I'm wondering if you have an example of like places that are doing this really well. So that are either building community or like building up bright spots. Does anything come to mind?
Well, so we have a couple of our regions actually have AI leadership networks. And so they come together on a regular basis. I mean, we provide a lot of professional development, but they in virtual communities where they're able to have shared problems of practice together and create that like regional, like there's the beauty of we did a thing at the state level, so we created a lot of connections there. But then that to have that carry through in the job-alike spaces and at the regional levels, the very localized spaces, so that creating the trust and relationships offer an opportunity for really rich learning. And that's sort of what we're seeing within our ESDs.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that helps to bring life to all those important questions that you asked. Christian, I think I want you to talk about similar themes. So we know how important it is to bring a lot of people into the table, both to have informed policies and to build trust and all sorts of other important benefits. Can you talk a bit about how decision makers might begin to build buy-in amongst teachers, parents, boards of education on like the whys of that we're using AI, and where from those groups are you seeing pushback?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, I mean, AI is such a ubiquitous thing that there's a lot of different kinds of whys. Some of them are more clear than others. And so that's where you see a lot of change happening quickly. The whys of like student data privacy and safety, for example, that's usually like one of the first quote unquote whys that are very clear. And so you see a lot of actual policy from a federal level. We've had so many federal policies passed specifically on student safety and AI. And on a like federal policy moves so slowly. So the fact that we have like over 100 pieces of legislation that hit on this in this current Congress, like that's crazy. And like it's a very clear why statement that there's bipartisan support for. It's very clear as to why people should come to the table and talk about that. I think what Chris is talking about is usually another clear why. The idea of AI tools and thinking about it from a procurement and budget conversation is also usually a pretty clear why, because the majority of districts in the country right now are working against budget deficits, where there's a really big conversation happening on a national scale around the post-COVID ballooning of ed tech budgets across education systems. And so thinking about how can education systems look at that, how much money they're spending on ed tech tools and where should you save? Really asking why do we have this tool? Is it effective? What are teachers using it? Like all of these things are happening. And so like those kind of quote unquote why conversations are also usually a very clear space for systems to start at. And then I'll say there's the harder conversations that I think it's you like that school boards and districts and states have a little bit of a harder time of bringing people to the table for. But it gets to the broader conversation of like educational transformation about like shifting learning standards to be a little bit more relevant in the future in the future that kids are going to be growing up into, or thinking about adjusting I don't know, teaching and learning practices. Like those are the harder questions usually. One, because those are actually the least clear. There's no clear quote unquote why we should be doing this. There's no clear um, vision of what success looks like. When it comes to student AI safety, there's a clear vision of what success is going to look like. But when it comes to adjusting teaching and learning practices, it's actually very muddy about what success is going to look like. People have different opinions about what, quote unquote, the right way to adjust teaching and learning is going to look like. People have different opinions about what the quote unquote right learning standards are going to look like. And so that's a much harder discussion to have usually. And people tend to lean out of those discussions primarily because they feel either not informed enough to have a discussion on this effectively, or there's so much talking in circles about like what the goal state is going to be that people are a little bit discouraged from continuing those conversations. And so from a systems level, and this is like I'm thinking a little bit more at the level of like state school boards, maybe even like local school boards. A lot of it is like starting with um, context building first before getting into the actual discussion. Meaning, if you bring people to the table, it's usually best to invest a little bit of time into making sure those people at the table are on the same page of what the goal state is, have a little bit of enough technical understanding of the problem at hand so that way they can actually participate at a state level. This is actually one of the harder things is like bringing people to the table to have an understanding about the actual um, legislative mechanisms at play. And like we experienced this in California. We had a AI work group come together at CDE. We brought in a bunch of superintendents. We brought in a lot of union leaders. We brought in a lot of practitioners to come and sit at come to Sacramento and sit at the table at CDE where we're having discussions exactly on, how do we actually set learn like should we have discussions around learning standards? Should we have discussions around the curricula that the state is suggesting? And one of the things we realized was a gap was the practitioners coming from school settings into a setting in Sacramento didn't have enough context about how does Sacramento operate and what can or can't CDE do, what can or can't the state legislature do. And so like there was a gap in the technical expertise on like if I'm here at this table, what agency do I have at this table? That was another like I think thing that we needed to build before we are actually able to have um, like really productive conversations. And so those like more complex questions, the common metaphor being used of like, turning the cruise ship that is education, it moves very slowly. And so those conversations actually really require investing a little bit in one, having a clear consensus on what the goal state is, and two, the people that are at the table, building their own capacities to have enough agency to participate in those conversations effectively.
Yeah, that's so important, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. So one more question for you all, and then we're going to turn it over to question and answers. We started by talking about what you all were most excited about, and where you saw potential for AI to solve problems in education. So I'm going to go around, and in one sentence or less, I'd love to hear from each of you. What's a risk that you're concerned about? Let's start with you, Chris.
Um, I think the political willingness to change. We can now use AI to do anything, but do we have a human element that's open? We always say education should look different, but now that we can, do we have humans that are willing to let it happen?
Yeah, great. Jessica, can you go next?
I won't say ditto, but that's a very big proposition. I would say, I've said it before throughout today, is sort of just the growing disparities and the gaps between resources, expertise, and supporting our smallest systems and our biggest systems.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, that gap. I mean, there are a lot of conversations around equity gaps. I think that I'm a little bit honestly less concerned about the gap to access to tools, but more concerned about the gap to access to like basic AI literacy or digital literacy. I think those literacies are really important for decision makers, for parents, for people in sitting in policy seats. I think, yeah, like access to those like the kind of basic literacy around what is AI, how is it actually affecting education, and what should we do about it? I think that context, I'm a little bit worried about the gap in people even heck leaning into those conversations.
Thank you so much. I think there's so much to think about and so much more I want to ask you, but I'd love to turn it over to our audience for the question and answer period. So if you have questions about what we talked about what you wish we had talked about, just put them in the question and answer, and our director of communications is going to come on to help us moderate that. Abby. I didn't actually see any questions, but maybe not yet. Okay. I think we could probably wait a couple minutes and see if people have questions, and if not, we will say thank you for being here and close us up.
Sure. Well, start with one question for panelists, whoever wants to take it. What's one thing about how the people that you're working with are perceiving AI implementation that you wish would shift? How it kind of gets to this question of building trust, and maybe it's a misconception that folks have about what AI is and what how students are using it. Can you talk a little bit about perception and communicating around that?
Can you ask that again real quick?
Perception of AI implementation and how students are using it, how schools are approaching it, what it's being used for, and if you could change something about that perception.
I think we've limited our thinking. We're thinking of AI as a singular ingest and output model, right? Like write a paper, ingest paper, output paper, math problem, ingest math problem, output math problem, build lesson, ingest problem, output problem. And that's really when you start moving into that transition from agent to agentic, right? Is because is now we're looking at how do you look at the intersections. So I mean we've moved away from those problems because we've prioritized human interaction in our lessons. I mean we have like whiteboards. If you walk into our classroom, we're not having computers sit in front of computers and output. They have whiteboards and they're outputting whiteboards and they're working as teams, but then we're identifying team roles. It's also the reason why I don't sit on a lot of the different district leadership teams, because in school systems, we're still thinking of AI as a singular input and then input, then output. Versus when I'm working with our programmer team, our development team that's building our own AI tools, we're thinking of our problem, we're backwards designing our problems. And just like we're building an occupational hierarchy or like a flow, an organizational chart, we're defining our agent roles, and then we're defining the roles for the educational model that we want. Now, there's superintendents we work with. There's incredible superintendents across the like there's like a George Philhauer out of Indiana who's working on micro schools and using AI to build it. You have a David Shino out of Cajon Valley in California. He's working on World of Work and he's using AI agents to build it. But the people that are thinking about AI not as a singular input and output, and those are those questions that like plagiarism comes up, right? Well, input paper, output paper, versus we're looking at it as a singular function and not at now how these agents can interact with each other. And you can build a whole organizational chart and how it all kind of interacts. And if we really want to teach AI, we need to start teaching about the roles of individuals on a team or how people work together or how you function as an organization. So we can actually teach AI from human to human lessons and move away from this singular input output, which is not driving that cognitive development in your students anyway. But it does make it so we find very few teams that are actually thinking of AI in this way of intersections of roles and teams and productivity. And it makes it hard to have, like, I don't feel like we have the same conversation when we're meeting with other school superintendents because the world is still hung up on the input output singular function mentality.
I think that was something like as thinking about the role of the teacher in their use and engagement with AI, as a function for doing their job, but then also with students, like how to equip teachers as facilitators, teachers as partners in the journey, and AI liter. I mean, I think that's like distilling or mitigating the fear factor like at all levels of the system, but it is like, okay, how are we using chat? But that's like a very narrow function, right? And I think what Chris is inviting is how is every role thinking differently, in terms of how they bring their craft to life, and then obviously students have a different intersection with it as well.
Jessica, I wonder, since you mentioned AI literacy, I wonder there's a question about making the idea of AI literacy a bit more concrete, and thinking about what that actually looks like in schools or at the state level. Can you talk about that a bit?
I can say a couple of things, but I believe it's an AI EDU's mission around AI literacy. But what I would say, just from where I sit and work, is it's sort of what Chris was saying is even with the leaders in our ESDs, how each of our nine is understanding and employing and using AI in their different pockets is different because of I think it's because of their own literacy, in terms of what it is, how it's evolving. And I think we have some that see it just as a like a supercharged Google search. And then we have others that are like, okay, we're using this to actually level the playing field with supporting our business officers in all of our districts across the region. And here are the tools we're equipping them with to be able to align the different things that they do in their jobs. And so it's very the continuum is very great in terms of what that differences in literacy look like. But Christian, you have a way better answer, I am sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've articulated this out to differentiate between the competencies required, like what does AI literacy look like at the district level, at a school site level, at an individual teacher's level, and then like at a student's level. The I guess through line is there's understanding the technology that is kind of like a baseline. On top of that, there is understanding how human-centered skills contribute to AI literacy, meaning I still want kids and teachers to be good at asking questions. Like we don't think about that as AI literacy, but it really is a necessary component to how an individual student or a teacher can be a healthy and like and critical user of the technology. But like asking a good question is like one of those foundational skills that we think a lot of folks need. And then there's like literacy at the I guess decision maker perspective. So from like for administrators, for policymakers, whatever that is, it's a little bit less about the actual technical implementation, but it's a little bit more about like how is this technology really transforming the way that the school system needs to prepare young people, that we need to set I don't know, procurement and we should be managing our budget, what is actually investing in innovation need to look like. There's that, I guess, angle of literacy. Um, but I would point you to we've actually written this out into like a full report. We refer to it as like AI readiness, like what does holistic readiness look like? Literacy is a component of that holistic readiness, but I think it needs to go beyond that. Um, and I think Shira, I'll let you tell me if we're going to be out of time, but I do want to address the question of like I see the Q&A around plagiarism, and I wanted to mention a little bit about like this is kind of what Chris is saying, but like the conflation that like AI is the thing that we need to be working on, or like AI implementation is like one initiative. It really is about like identifying a problem of practice, working at a problem that you've been working on even before AI, and thinking about how AI might contribute to solving that problem. I think plagiarism is another example of that. Plagiarism is a problem of practice. AI is affecting the specific problem, but it isn't inherently an AI problem by itself. I think the traditional things about, what does assessment design look like? How do I actually design my lesson plan so that way I'm assessing things like collaboration and the student's ability to critically think and like all of those things that I mean, when I was in the classroom, I attended PD that actually like helped with assessment design and plagiarism. And I think those same things are true. That solution building just needs to consider AI as one of those things, either a tool or a pressure point that teachers are thinking about. And so I think that's what the theme of the AI implementation is not like a one initiative for a school district, but it is about thinking about the specific things that you want to address as a school district, and then considering AI as a solution or as a thing maybe even causing a problem for those specific topics.
Yes, I'm so glad you answered that question and addressed that. And I think that is a great note to end on. So I want to thank AEFP for hosting this. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists and thank everybody who came today. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks.